Today's topic is a good one, and it's a highly sophisticated one because it touches on so many different aspects, the key components of our existence. And that is how to really break patterns, how to come out of behavior from the past, how to use those experiences to move us forward, but not to linger on them beyond the point of learning. And before we get into that, really setting the foundation, the foundational blocks of this discussion is a twofold dynamic that we just have to embrace because it's just how life is designed. One is life wants us to grow. It wants us to be big and whole and expansive and imaginative. It wants to express itself through us in its highest form, in our highest light. So that always comes out as challenges, as triggers, the difficulties that we encounter are there to bring us out of our comfort zones, to make us grow beyond our beliefs, our truth structure, as I call it. And ultimately, every belief is a self-limiting belief because everything is possible. And then we come along and we pick a handful of things that we believe and we create our reality from that. And then we try to find ourselves, our path through life in that sliver of all that is possible. So we really want to learn to open ourselves up into the space of allowing, of facilitating. It's a space of creativity and open-mindedness, imagination. You're in receiving mode. You're participating in life, facilitating life. You're curious about what comes next. These are all the qualities that we want to nurture in ourselves so that as we go through our daily life, we stay open to everything that's possible. So the chances are the greatest that we find ourselves in the way we're supposed to be in all of it that's possible. So that's one side of the equation, as life is constantly prompting us to grow beyond our limits, perceived limits. And then the other side of the equation is us and our resistance to growth. And there's some reason for that. We can't just instantly grow into everything we can be. That would not be life as we know it. There's a reason growth is gradual. There needs to be some stability. There need to be times of rest and relaxation and recovery before we start the next chapter of expansion, before we tackle the next insight about ourselves. It's just the limitations of being in our bodies, in this 3D dimension, in this physical space. Things don't happen instantly. They take time. And ultimately, there's something very magical and miraculous in this existence that when we're not lost in our thoughts, which keep us small, they keep us lonely, and they keep us in a scared little place because it's up against us against the world, and we feel isolated and separate from it all. But rather, when we can see everything as it is, because as it is the infinity of it all. Everything is possible. Again, everything exists. There are no limitations in the objective reality that's out there. It's just how we see it that puts limits on it. It puts limits on our experience of the vastness, of the unlimitedness. And how we see it is very specific to ourselves. It's colored by our own experiences, and even more by the things we inherit, the limiting beliefs that we grow up in, that we observe in others, and our family lineage that get passed along and blindly repeated. Limitations we pick up from the media, from our environment, our generation, our gender, social group. So most of our limited beliefs are ultimately not even our own. I have a friend who's a child psychologist, and his client right now is a 4-year-old girl who has a limp. And the girl's mother was an athlete who injured herself and has a limp. And so there's no physiological reason for the little girl to have a limp, but we learn through mimicry. We absorb the energy of others. Most of the things that we learn from it is not what our parents said to us or peers said to us. It's how we watch them behave, how we watch them carry themselves. We absorb that. So then later on, we find ourselves with all these layers of limiting beliefs and judgments. And so then the journey becomes to generate awareness around these judgments, these limiting beliefs, and to release them back into the flow, let them come and go, because ultimately all thoughts come and go. All feelings arise and pass. And it's only when we attach ourselves to them by judging them, by labeling them, by identifying with them, that it pulls us into the smallness of each individual thought, each individual feeling. And the monkey mind, being the way it is, will lead to the next thought and the next thought. Before we know it, we're lost in thought half of the day. Some people say up to 80% of the day we're lost in thought. And that's time not really spent living, not really being here, engaging with the present moment and what really is the only thing that's real right there in front of us. So our awareness muscle is something that can be developed and strengthened so that we get lost in thought less often, that we notice that we're lost in thought sooner, that we bring our attention back to where we want to be, which is right now, and the task at hand in front of us, engaging with what really is real. And the same thing with our feelings. We want to be able to allow ourselves to feel them fully. One of the big misconceptions of mindfulness and meditation is that somehow you're negating negative thoughts and only focusing on the positive ones, or that in your observation of your feelings, that's not really feeling them. Couldn't be farther from the truth. Mindfulness is feeling your feelings fully so that they can arise and pass, so that we no longer get pulled into the reaction to our feelings, because ultimately reactivity to our feelings is where most of our energy goes. And this was a big turning point for me when I finally got that most of my energy, 95% of it, was going into my reaction to how I was feeling, not the feeling itself. So to learn that distinction is key. Key to recouping all of that energy, key to staying more present, key to being able to make clear decisions because we're no longer in this reactive stew, amplifying things well beyond their expiration date, their shelf life. So it all comes back to how can we stay out of reactivity, and staying out of reactivity equals being present. We're reacting to our stuck feelings, and feelings get stuck every time something unpleasant arises and we push it away. I don't want to feel that. The feeling gets stuck, the energy of the feeling. Something pleasant arises. Ooh, I like that. You react to that feeling. And again, it keeps the feeling from arising and passing. It keeps it stuck. And then we're full of all these stuck feelings, and we start to steer and control and maneuver our environment based on these stuck feelings, avoiding the situations that result in unpleasant feelings and wanting more of the ones that are pleasant. And so we're no longer really in the flow of life. We're just being steered and controlled and ultimately manipulated by our own reaction to our own feelings. And more importantly, the brain can never come out of the interpretation of an objective reality that led to a particular feeling when we keep reacting to that particular feeling. It keeps re-inflaming, reigniting the nervous system in that particular way. The example I mention often is, the smell of smoke, for example. Two people, person A smells smoke, and the association is maybe to childhood summer camp, singing, good times. It's a pleasant sensation. Person B maybe experienced a fire at some point, and smelling smoke elicits a negative reaction, negative sensation. Same sensory input, two very different sensations. And if we keep reacting to the sensation, we're only reinforcing that particular wiring. So it's never about the sensory input, never about the situation. It's not doing anything to us. We're perceiving it that way. So ultimately, the situation is about us. We're always only experiencing ourselves, what is going on, our internal makeup. So bringing awareness, the light of awareness to our sensations, to the task at hand, it shifts us from feeling like things are happening to us to things are happening because of us, because it's a mirror. Everything we experience is a mirror. And then ultimately to things are happening for us. Because that's where we started out from, is life wants us to grow. It wants us to heal. It doesn't want us to stay small and scared and lonely. So it really comes down to how much can we come out of resistance to life, to the happening, so that we can more and more allow our unfolding, allow our unlimitedness to surface. Because awareness ultimately is a container. And when we're aware, nothing is bigger than the container. If we can be aware of our thoughts, then we are not our thoughts. We're bigger than our thoughts. We can be aware of our feelings, our sensations. Then clearly we're not our feelings. We're bigger than our feelings. We're the container of our experience. So the deeper I ultimately is the awareness of our presence, of the aliveness in our body. Joseph Campbell calls it the rapture of our aliveness. That's ultimately what we're after, what we're all seeking. And so to get to that place, self-awareness, nurturing self-awareness throughout the day. It's not necessarily just sitting in meditation morning or evening. That helps. But again, life is the teacher, and ultimately every situation is an opportunity to practice presence, to stay connected to our senses. Our senses are the connective tissue to right now, what's happening, life unfolding as it is. And if we can learn to not judge our senses, judge the sensation that comes in as a result of the senses, then we can stay more present. Then we can recognize the validity that everything has a right to exist. Everything is valid by virtue of its existence. And that ultimately there's no right or wrong. Sure, we have our own personal truth, but it doesn't come from mental validation. It comes from an inner knowing. And your inner knowing does not require others to agree. It does not clash with the truth of others. In fact, it wants everyone else to have their own inner truth. Because being at peace with yourself is being at peace with your inner truth, is being connected to your own blueprint. And so then we bring that peace into our situations with family, friends, and work, and wherever we go. Doing a time check here. So ultimately, coming out of past patterns is to recognize, how does something make us feel, and to ultimately hold space for the feeling so that we no longer react to it. If we're reacting to it, then the action that we're taking is one of divisiveness. It's repeating a reaction to a feeling a certain way. That's why we wind up dating the same people over and over. That's why we wind up going down a particular career path over and over. And that's why we wind up just repeating old patterns, is because we're reacting to a certain feeling. And those feelings are typically lack, some area inside that needs self-care, self-love, more attention, more me time, more stillness. And so the more we become aware of that place of lack, the less we seek it on the outside, the more we are able to work on ourselves and dissolve it ultimately. It's a magical, miraculous feeling the first time when one puts one's attention to some energy that is bothering you when you feel triggered. And you keep your attention there and not push it away. And then sometimes sooner, sometimes later, you feel that energy dissolve. And it's just an amazing feeling. You've healed yourself. You're no longer reacting to that feeling, no longer keeping it stuck by reacting to it. And so we are ultimately self-healing machines. And as we heal ourselves, we bring that light of awareness of ourselves into other situations. People that we used to feel triggered by, we're now able to hold space for them as they are. And that brings light and space into their end of the dynamic. When we're at odds with people, we're 50%. We're holding that dynamic in place with our resistance to them, with wanting them to be different. So when we come out of that resistance, which is again just reacting to a particular feeling, then not only does the feeling dissolve, it essentially is let go. It wanted to come and go initially, and our reaction was keeping it in place, sometimes for years and decades. But not only does that feeling, stuck feeling, dissolve, but we're now introducing a different dynamic. Change has come into our relationships, and that we're no longer holding them in place. And this gives the other person an opportunity to reflect on themselves. They don't have to, it's not a guarantee, but we shouldn't expect it. But very often it has to happen because a change has come into, an energetic change has come into the dynamic. So it all comes down to having a mindfulness practice so that we can bring the light of our awareness into our sensations. Again, those sensations are a result of an interpretation of an external event. And we keep that interpretation in place if we keep reacting to the sensation. But once we can hold space for that sensation, observe it, look at its size, its color, its texture, make friends with it, even embrace it, give it a name. A lot of inner child healing works that way. Then we can come out of resistance to our feelings, and then we come out of resistance to the situation. It no longer triggers us. So life is going to unfold. We have our blueprint one way or another. The best we can do to allow the unfolding is to come out of resistance to it, which is to come out of resistance to our feelings. And again, when we can hold space for our feelings, thoughts and feelings, then we become the container for those thoughts and feelings. It's the attachment to thoughts and feelings that leads to a roller coaster experience of life, up and down and around and around. But when we become the awareness of our thoughts and feelings, the container, then those thoughts and feelings become much smaller, much more manageable. They arise and pass. It's no longer this big wave, it's just a ripple. And that's when we become larger than any situation. Nothing can harm us, nothing can get to us as long as we stay on the side of our awareness. It's only when we get pulled in, when we identify with thoughts and feelings, that things get rough. It's where anxiety and fear and doubt, all the negative stuff lives. But when we're the awareness of those things, even fear and doubt, those thoughts still appear, but we no longer identify with them. So we're just bigger than any situation that could possibly happen. But till we get there, the situations are prompting us to grow. They're triggering us to grow so that we can get there, so that we can become a container for all of it. And that container ultimately is oneness. It's no longer feeling separate, like I'm over here and that which I'm judging is over there. That mental lens, lots of judgment, lots of labeling, constant separateness. I'm over here, that's over there. But rather experiencing brings us closer, holding space. We become a container for whatever wants to express itself. Probably experienced that from being in a relationship. Most of the time, our partners just want to feel heard. Having a good friend, a great friend, is somebody who can listen, who's a great listener. They're holding space for us to express ourselves so that that energy can come out. That's why journaling is so powerful. So that monkey mind, lots of thoughts jumping from branch to branch. But when you write, pen to paper, ideally, then that energy starts to crystallize and leave us. And we always feel better. Not to be afraid of me time, not to be afraid of stillness, not to be afraid of the unknown. That's a liberating state to be in. When we can hold space for all those feelings that arise in response to those situations, then we're bigger than the situations. And ultimately, there's incredible beauty in the unknown, in not having to control everything. There's an ease and a lightness and a flow of living. We see opportunities we wouldn't otherwise see. We start to live by that inner blueprint, that inner voice that is our GPS. It's built in. It says something resonates, something else doesn't. So we no longer have to figure it out. We no longer have to figure out our life ahead of living it. So, but as all things, just like going to the gym, and working on our muscles, so the awareness muscle needs a little practice. But the good part is when we go to the gym, we're kind of in one place. We have our hour, half hour, then we leave again. But with mindfulness, you can use everything as a gym. Every moment of every day is the gym of your life, of your journey of self-realization. First thing you do when you wake up, stay connected to your senses. What are you seeing? What are you hearing? What are you tasting? What are you feeling? That's what keeps you present. That keeps you engaged with what's happening right now. And that's what keeps you open and flowing. Noticing opportunities when you're waiting in line at the coffee shop. Instead of looking at the phone, there's an opportunity to observe things that you would otherwise not see. Heck, start a conversation with someone. Sitting in a meeting and somebody's late and it hasn't started. Again, rather than being in resistance and blame, observe the environment. Maybe there's parts that you haven't observed yet before. The decor, the design, the technology, it's all pretty incredible just because it exists. Everything is incredible because it exists. So with that said, unless there's any questions, virtual hands, we can do the, we can go into our guided meditation part. Right on time. So there's two parts to this. One is developing thought awareness. Thoughts will always come and go. Mindfulness meditation is not about suppressing thoughts. It's not about clinging to positive ones and pushing away negative ones. It's about allowing all thoughts to come and go. When our thoughts are crazy, we wake up and our mind is all over the place. What calms us is not being in resistance to it. What calms the mind down is seeing it for what it is. Doesn't make sense to the mind. It seems paradoxical, but again, not being in resistance is what brings us into a state of peace and observation and curiosity and seeing the bigger picture, looking at all different angles, not just being stuck in one particular way. The story of the elephant and 7 blind men walking into the room and each one grabbing onto one part of the elephant and then thinking that's an elephant. The guy that grabs the tail thinks it's a bottle brush. Guy that grabs a leg thinks it's a tree stump. So when we react to things, we attach ourselves to very limited experience of that thing. And so we don't really see the bigger picture. We're not open to seeing it. So we want to practice observing our thoughts come and go. And that whenever we notice that our mind has drifted and we're getting pulled into it, we're being pulled out of awareness of thoughts and into identification with thoughts. Whenever we notice we've been lost in thought, the key is to notice it and bring our attention back to, in this case, the incoming and outgoing breath at the entrance of our nostrils. And this is a microcosm, an exercise that represents the microcosm of everyday interactions. That when we notice something isn't going the way we want it, somebody cuts us off in traffic, could be the smallest things. Running out of toothpaste. That we observe it, stay out of reactivity, and just notice it as best as we can and bring our attention back to where we want our attention to be, which is to get back on track on the road or find an extra tube of toothpaste. The path of least resistance is what we're working on. That's what the awareness muscle is about. So as we're keeping our attention on our breath, within a few seconds, the mind will come in and pull our attention away. And when we notice that the mind has drifted, that's the key moment where we develop our awareness muscle. That as we notice it, to be in as little resistance and as little frustration as possible, and to bring our attention back to where we want it to be. So it's not keeping your attention on your breath for the longest possible time. That's not where the focus should be, but it's on that moment where you notice that the mind has drifted. And from there, with as little frustration, reaction as possible, bringing our attention back to where we want it to be. So that's part one in the exercise. Part two is body scan. So we'll be part by part, traversing our body. And again, observing any sensations that may arise. We're biochemical, electrical beings. We're constantly interacting with our environment. There are 7 trillion cells inside of us, all cooperating to make you, you. It's incredible. And so there's all this activity, all this engagement that, for the most part, is happening blindly. We're not even aware of it. And so when we start observing and putting our attention to different body parts, and we start to notice those sensations, we notice our aliveness. So the body scan, anyone who's done Yoga Nidra will be familiar with it, is a deeper version of that, where we learn to just feel our feelings, observe them, which is feeling our feelings fully. Someone in this morning session asked, isn't observing our feelings, does that mean we become robots? That's an important question, and I bring that up. It was one of the last things that really clicked for me is, no, your feelings are sensations on your body. And your reaction to the feeling, those are two separate things. So you're not oppressing or suppressing, denying your feelings by observing them. You're just literally observing your sensations and staying out of reactivity to them. That's the key. So the second part, the body scan, will be practicing observing our sensations without reacting to them. And let me just check the chat here. Yes. Yes, Veronica. Everything is incredible because it exists. Veronica likes to write down these key sentences. She came to the last retreat in Bali. All right. So with that said, if everyone is ready for the guided meditation, yes? All right. Okay. So finding a comfortable position, and with our eyes and mouth closed, focus on the incoming and outgoing breath at the entrance of your nostrils. If you have trouble locating your breath, you may breathe slightly harder once or twice. And then return to natural breath, normal breath. Let the detail of your breath pull you in closer. Notice the temperature of the incoming breath. Notice the temperature of the outgoing breath. And notice if there's a difference. Notice the pace of the incoming breath. And notice the pace of the outgoing breath. Notice if there's a difference. Is the breath more in the left nostril? Or is it more in the right nostril? Or is it in both nostrils? Simply observe without wanting it to be different. Whenever you find that your mind has wandered, simply notice it and bring your attention back to the incoming and outgoing breath at the entrance of your nostrils. Now gradually shift your attention to the top of your head, your crown chakra, an area about the size of your fist. And notice any sensations that may arise. It could be a tingling sensation, a tickly sensation, a prickly sensation, stinging sensation, pulsating sensation, a feeling of ants crawling. It could be a feeling of lightness or of pressure, of heat or cold. Any sensation is a valid sensation. If you feel no sensation at all, that's all right too. No need to look for a particular sensation. Simply observe. Now gradually move your attention to your forehead. And come around to the left side of your head. And around to the back of your skull. And around to the right side of your head. Always noticing any sensations that may arise. We're moving into your right eye socket. And across to the bridge of your nose. Onto the left eye socket. Moving down to your left cheek. And across to your lips. And over to the right cheek. And down to your chin. Always noticing any sensations that may arise. Now continue down to the front of your throat. Around to the left side of your neck. And move your attention to the back of your neck. And around to the right side of your neck. Moving down into your right shoulder. And into your bicep. And around to the tricep. And down into the back of your elbow. And around to the inside of your elbow. And down to the inside of your forearm. And the back of your forearm. Moving into the back of your hand. And around to the palm of your hand. And into your fingers. All the way to the tips. Always noticing any sensations that may arise. Now bring your attention back to your left shoulder. And down to the bicep. And around to the tricep. And down to the back of your elbow. And the inside of your elbow. Down to the inside of your forearm. Round to the back of your forearm. Now into the back of your hand. And into the palm of your hand. And into your fingers. All the way to the tips. Always noticing any sensations that may arise. Now bring your attention to your left upper back and slowly, evenly scan left to right. Moving down to your right middle back, slowly, evenly scan right to left. Moving down to your left lower back, slowly, evenly scan left to right. Always noticing any sensations that may arise. Now bring your attention to your left upper chest and slowly, evenly scan left to right. Moving down to your right rib cage, slowly, evenly scan right to left. Moving down to your lower left stomach, slowly, evenly scan left to right. Always noticing any sensations that may arise. Now moving your attention to your root chakra, the area above your pubic bone. And gradually move your attention to your left hip. onto your left butt cheek. And then the right butt cheek. And the right hip. Now move your attention into your right upper thigh, first the front. And then the back. Moving down into the back of your knee. And the front of your knee. And down to your shin. Down to your calf. And now starting with the heel, slowly, evenly scan across the bottom of your foot. And come around to the top of the foot. And now into the toes. All the way to the tips. Always noticing any sensations that may arise. Now shift your attention to your left upper thigh, first the front. And then the back. And down into the back of your knee. And around to the front of the knee. And down into your shin. And around to your calf. And now starting with the heel, slowly, evenly scan across the bottom of your foot. Come around to the top of the foot. And into your toes. All the way to the tips. Always noticing any sensations that may arise. Whenever you feel ready, you may gradually open your eyes. Relax your body. Notice your environment. Notice yourself in your environment. Notice the energy in your body. Notice your aliveness. Good work, everybody. That was a good session.